Good day, folks, and welcome to the Anorak Review Show, with I, your host, the Anorak. If an obscure Pink Floyd album that was made as a soundtrack to an even obscure French film wasn't special enough for you to make the subject of a 75th episode, then hopefully this may make it up for you for the 76th. Last time I've talked about David Bowie was a few months ago when I delved into his 11th album, Low. And I shall dig, today, into a more famous album of his, one that's close to turning 50 years old later this month, as well as one that shares the same birthday as me. Imagine that. By the early 70s, Bowie was already becoming something of a household name at the time, with his single Space Oddity, as well as his albums such as 1970's The Man Who Sold the World, and 1971's Hunky Dory. As soon as he finished and wrapped up work on Hunky Dory, David soon began work for his next album. This time, it would be somewhat different, a concept album of sorts, about a mysterious alien rock star who comes down to Earth and soon receives fame, praise and fortune. A chance for David to take on an androgynous alter ego, concepts similar to, say, Sgt. Pepper by the Beatles or Tommy by The Who. A few inspirations in both themes and music come from the likes of fellow various rock singers and musicians at the time, such as Vince Taylor and Iggy Pop. So, let's jump into one of his what could be considered his magnum opus, 1972's The Rise and Fall of Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from Mars. Or just Ziggy Stardust for short. Plus, YouTube does have a character limit when it comes to titling videos. And if you think a name like that is strange enough, you should be his cousin, Maggie Firequake. Or his best friend, Captain Beefheart. And yes, that latter one was an actual stage name for someone. Look it up. Anyways, we begin the album with 5 Years, mainly consisting of a drum beat and some piano with a bit of 12-string guitar. This already sets a tone for the album overall. This track being about how the newsreaders report that Earth has about, 5 years left until an impending apocalypse begins. Through the eyes and rather childlike perspective of this character, this alter ego of his, David describes various people, fat, skinny, tall and short, all the nobody people and all the somebody people. Likely he's living in Twilight Town if he's dealing with this many nobodies, and possibly Organization 13 as well. And he mentions other scenery too, like hearing telephones, opera houses and favourite melodies. The best kind of melodies have always been the merry kind. And upon knowing of this inevitable doom that will fall upon planet Earth, this character tries to cram and store in many things into his brain, to the point of it hurting like a warehouse. It seems he's running out of gigabyte storage and he has to update his brain in order to get more space. And as the song progresses, the music builds up along with Bowie's vocals, who too grows more intense and emotional, as he sings the chorus with an orchestra to accompany him, as if he's genuinely struck with fear and despair just from knowing about this unstoppable global disaster. Although on the bright side, 5 years after the album's release in 1977, the world seemed fine from there on. Unless you count Exorcist II The Heretic as an apocalyptic disaster, then, which I'm sure a vast majority of people would no doubt agree on. Next is Soul Love, a groovy track with Trevor Bolder of Uriah Heep on bass, Mick Woodmansey on the drums along with bongo and conga drums, and Mick Ronson on leading electric rhythm guitar. Together, they would be Bowie's backing band, fittingly named The Spiders from Mars. Keeping with the whole retro sci-fi feel of this album and its concepts, that name does sound like the title for a very cheesy alien invader B-movie from the 50s, like The Man from Planet X, The Thing from Another World, The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms, The Creature from the Black Lagoon, It Came from Beneath the Sea, Plan 9 from Outer Space, or It, The Terror from Beyond Space. And yes, those are all real film titles. Look them up. And of course, David Bowie not only sings here as always, but also plays the acoustic guitar. Here he sings about certain different kinds of love, such as the stone love between a mother and her late son, likely having been killed in a war or whatnot, as implied in the verse, "A brave son who gave his life to save the slogans." I mean, it was the early 70s after all. The Vietnam War was still kind of going on at the time. Another is the new love between a boy and a girl, talking new words that only they could share in on. A love that's so strong it tears their hearts. For which they would really need to make an appointment with a cardiologist. And then there's the soul love between a priest and God himself. Or rather, herself, themselves. Does God have pronouns? I don't know. As the Ziggy character, David observes these types of love, family, romantic, platonic, religious, etc., and concludes how love itself can be careless in how it chooses, how we all have our ideas of love and romance, how it works, whether we learn it from others, and figure it out by ourselves. All that Ziggy has is his love of love itself, likely meaning how he loves that the feeling of love itself even exists to begin with. Slightly meta if you think about it. Then he cryptically says that love isn't loving, perhaps saying that love isn't just about saying that you love someone, but that you actually feel that way to them. Nor is it just about sex and love-making, but also about actually caring for someone for the rest of their life. In a way, it's almost a deconstruction of love songs and romance in general. And then there's that cool saxophone solo, played by none other than Bowie himself, which only doubles the coolness if you were to figure that one out. After that is Age Daydream, a glammy rock tune where David properly introduces himself as the alter ego protagonist that is Ziggy Stardust himself, calling himself stuff like an alligator, a space invader, and a mama papa coming for you. The character of Ziggy himself is basically a bisexual alien rock star who has been sent to Earth, presumably by a god of sorts, to save mankind and Earth itself from the upcoming disaster hinted at in 5 years. And what better way to save both planet Earth and the human race than with the power of rock and roll? Unless you're Batman, who apparently hates rock and roll. David, or rather Ziggy, then tells us to shut up, bit rude of him, and he compares us to a squawking pink monkey bird. Personally, I thought I was more of a 400-foot tall purple platypus bear with pink horns and silver wings. And he's bursting up his brains for the words, no doubt from so much of the stuff he had to cram in 2 songs ago. And like with the previous song, Bowie also provides another sax solo, this time along with a penny whistle which he also plays as well. Only now we know for sure he's both a Goblin King and an alien rock star. He's apparently able to play 2 distinctly different instruments, both of which require blowing into them at the same time. And manages to play roughly the same melody. It's gotta take great skill, man. Really big, great skill. And after that little solo halfway through, we get more of that stringed arrangement to give us a little bit of grandiose and gravitas. Then soon enough, Mick Ronson gives us one big epic guitar solo. One that feels almost spacey, fitting enough if you pardon the pun or not, as it closes out the song with a fade out. Another really cool track from the Thin White Duke himself, with sweet riffs, neat innuendos in the lyrics, and one of the best uses of a tin whistle in any music I could think of so far. Then we have what might be the most well-known song of Ziggy Stardust, if not all of David Bowie's discography, next to Space Oddity, Starman. This was the Starboy of the baby boomer generation, before the actual Starboy by Weeknd. To call the song a big hit and signature song of his would be something of an understatement. While Space Oddity, the song itself, and the eponymous album it came from, marked the actual proper beginning of Bowie's direction, this song alone made him big, a household name. Especially made so thanks to his live TV performance on Top of the Pops, when David was strumming on acoustic guitar while donning this nice Technicolor jumpsuit and a snazzy ginger-red mullet, continually emphasizing the effeminate and androgynous nature of the character and the album itself, and performing with his Spiders from Mars band. And the song would, of course, appear in a few various pop culture media from then on, here and there, even as recently as the trailer for Pixar's new Lightyear film, which would no doubt be released in cinemas already by the time I've uploaded this video. Anyways, after addressing the forthcoming apocalypse in 5 years, observing various kinds of love in Soul Love, and introducing himself proper in Moon Age Daydream, Ziggy finally reaches out to mankind and its youth through the power of, what else? TV, radio, and good old rock and roll music. From the point of view of one of the many individual people hearing about Ziggy and referring to him as a Starman, a savior for humanity. Or maybe it's Ziggy himself singing about, well, himself in third person. The iconic chorus itself is indeed very catchy and memorable, and there may be a reason for that. For the more you actually listen to it and think about it, it kind of sounds like another classic song that continues to resonate with so many people for so many years. Over the Rainbow, from the 1939 film adaptation of The Wizard of Oz. Yeah, apparently a bit of influence was deliberate. Specifically the octave leaps from in Somewhere and Starman, which I think could be interesting to look into and interpret. And another funny thing about this iconic song was that it was apparently written and composed roughly at the last minute. The heads at RCA Records, the label that released a good chunk of Bowie's albums from Hunky Dory all the way to Scary Monsters and Super Creeps, had requested for a song from the Ziggy album that could be commercially accessible enough to be made into a lead single. So Bowie and crew came up with this track and used it to replace, of all things, a cover of Chuck Berry's Round and Round. One of the very few times of executive meddling that have made a smart and wise decision and have actually improved something. This, regardless, is still a sweet space glam rock anthem, with a bit of both mellotron and an actual stringed orchestra, and a glorious electric guitar solo from Ronson. While Ashes to Ashes seems like a sequel to Space Oddity, lyrically at least, this feels more like a spiritual successor to Space Oddity, or at least an interquel between Space Oddity and Ashes to Ashes, musically and thematically. It's still a great song, and it deserves its place as one of the bestest of Bowie's songs. Side 1 ends with It Ain't Easy, another simple acoustic ballad where between the calm verses and the intense choruses, Ziggy sings at a somewhat high octave about climbing to the top of the mountains and looking over at seas, after Ziggy pretty much achieved so much fame and attention through telly and radio, he soon realizes immediately how much of a challenge his goal is going to get. It ain't easy getting to heaven when you're going down. Summing up how easier it is to dream about doing something good than it is to actually do something good in real life. The song also features backing vocals from Donna Gillespie, who performed in Andrew Lloyd Webber's Jesus Christ Superstar, and a harpsichord played by none other than keyboardist himself, Rick Wakeman, who also played the Mellotron in Space Oddity. And yet for some reason here, neither were credited for such at all. Why? You have these two great talents performing at least one song in your album. One of them you had already performed in a song or two in your past discography, and you don't give him a little mention in the liner notes here? What the hell?